Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. I feel very blessed to be sitting here with Hans Martin Buth. How the devil are you?
Very well, how are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for having me.
I'm good. Well, first of all, congratulations on winning the Grammy for Best Immersive Album.
That's right.
With, of course, Peter Gabriel's incredible album, I.O. Can you give us a little bit of a preamble? How did you get from growing up in Germany to sitting here in real world studios, mixing such an incredible artist?
How the hell would I know? Wow, that's a long story. Well, I'll make it fairly brief. I'm not one of these people who knew at age 14 that we're going to be in the studio. I just like pop music, and I dabbled in instruments, always to the point where I could write little songs and do it with my high school band and stuff. And my plan was something totally different. And the plan failed. I became a journalist. That was the plan. And then I got bored. And then kind of looked around what I was going to do. Moved to the States because I had friends there, just to hang out for a while. And a friend of mine started a program called Music Tech then, later McNally Smith in Minneapolis, a recording engineering school. And I went to see him. I thought it's totally awesome. So that's how I got started being an engineer. And then it's a long story what all happened. I worked for Prince for a long time in Minneapolis. And when that was over, briefly had a job at a proper place where we did like commercials and TV music, blah, 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 blah. And then we moved back, my family and I, to Germany and just kind of started over with the Prince resume in the backpack, which was quite helpful. I just did the usual recording, engineering, producing thing, worked with mostly European artists, people like Zucchero, huge Italian guy.
Oh yeah, Sugar,
guy named Musti, who's a house DJ and did stuff for Tom Jones, and he's a great producer. And I've worked with the Scorpions for many years in various capacities.
So for context,
yeah,
you were Prince's engineer for how many years?
I was his direct engineer for 4 years in the late 90s, yeah. Did all the stuff in Minneapolis. Him and I alone in this vast building, turning out song after song after song. Yeah.
Was it true he was a 10 a.m. start, boom, get straight to work guy?
Not at all.
That's what you see in all of the memes and the quotes all over the internet.
No, I had in those days a pager. You know, those little, for you younger people, those little things where you'd have a little box on your belt and then it would buzz and then you'd see a phone number you were supposed to call and then you pull over and call them and see what happens. So I always had to wait for the buzz and then I'd be instructed when to show up.
And that could be any time, day or night.
Yeah, but it usually would be like early afternoon or late morning, and then we'd go till early morning. So
it's funny because I've literally seen 100 memes over the years, like Prince would turn up at 10 a.m. every morning.
Whatever. He just made sure that you turned up when he said, we're going to start at 10. That you didn't show up at 10:30 or 11 or 5 after 10, but you'd be ready to go at 10.
I mean, you were a young man in those days and it was just super exciting.
It was super exciting, yeah. I mean, it was super intense and it was, my first, for lack of a better word, rock star. And I thought, well, that's just how that goes. Everybody's like that.
Dave Jordan told me about working for Zappa, similar thing. Yeah. Phone would ring at 2 o'clock in the morning, be in bed and we'd like, got this idea.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, that only happened like once or twice in 4 years that I'd be called in after midnight. And then would be, But he was just crazily prolific, I mean, the hardest thing that I certainly couldn't do today anymore is when he'd be on tour in the States, he'd, have a show on the week. I'd have shows on the weekends and maybe Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday he'd fly back to Minneapolis. And then he'd come into the studio mid-late afternoon ready to work. And then we'd work on literally nonstop until he'd leave again Friday. So I have 40-hour shifts and stuff on a regular basis. And, I think they would kill me at this point. I
think that's the experience when you're working with that kind of level of artist, especially when they're in such a creative phase.
Yeah.
But now, as you're saying, when you work with artists that are grown, they've been through it all, it can be a lot more structured.
It's much more structured, yeah. I mean, I work with a lot of people at over 70. I work a lot with a band called the Scorpions, and they're 76.
Wonderful band.
Yeah. Things are much more relaxed. Priorities a bit shifted, which isn't necessarily bad because kind of the impatient leaves.
So much acquired knowledge that they can actually focus on what they want to do. They're not,
And there isn't that envy that you may steal some of their fire when you add some of your own creativity, but rather it's an expectation that you add it, which is very, very cool.
Isn't that one of the things that made Bowie so good, and Peter Gabriel as well, obviously?
Totally, yeah. People like that really added to their charm to be able to use, to recognize the talent and the contribution of others and not be worried about it. I would add Madonna to that pool, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
And give them credit for that matter.
Yeah,
that's
Trent Reznor.
Yeah,
Trent Reznor. All that. So many musicians came in and worked on those records. Those great records. And maybe without going on this massive diatribe, it could be a big thing where people are going, why isn't the music like that anymore? Because so many people are working in isolation now.
I'm with that. I mean, one of the things you have to do when you're a young musician right now, you have to be your own video editor. You have to do the PR, probably manage yourself.
Yeah.
You're the distribution system of your music. And, when are you actually going to do the music? So it's kind of hard to recognize that having put in the hours for one particular thing is worth tapping into. Yeah. There isn't like a disgust by young people for things that happened 40 years ago. It's not like, I'm in my mid-50s, and when I was in my 20s, I certainly didn't reference things, or not that many, from the 40s and 30s, which would be a similar distance to...
I know, isn't it incredible?
Yeah.
Nirvana, which is like one of the last great movements in rock music, the whole of the grunge scene, is 30 years ago.
Yeah. 35, almost, yeah.
Yeah. You go 1995, 30 years ago, when it was all Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, that's incredible.
7 years ago, I really got into immersive music, and I did so because I heard some binaural renderings of 5.1 mixes, and I thought, wow, that's a game changer. If you don't need a huge setup and need to sit in the middle to listen to music, this may be something that you can communicate with creatively. If you can put on headphones and you can walk around, you can jog, you can be on the subway, whatever, and listen to immersive, awesome. So I got into it and really tried to figure out how you do this creatively. How do you create music in immersive? As I was doing so, I played some of it to a friend called Andreas Sennheiser, who's one of the boys that run Sennheiser, and he said, "Oh, Peter Gabriel just contacted me. If I knew anybody who's really good at this binaural thing, I'll see if I can hook you guys up." And nothing happened for a couple of weeks, and then I got an email that you want to get as a fanboy from Peter Gabriel saying, "Hi, I'm Peter Gabriel, and I want to do this. Do you think you could help me with this?" And I'm like... And I had booked this studio before as a producer, just for projects of mine, because it's just such a great place to hang and record and be away from London and wherever. And it's very affordable as well. So I had been here before. So Peter's tech people knew me, and he had put him in CC in the mail. And they went, "Oh, that's Boff. Wow, we know him," and stuff. So we started a conversation, and we did some cool binaural stuff here. And Peter, as is his wont, kind of looked at it from the outside, supporting it in spirit. And then the whole like Dolby Atmos, Apple, big record company thing happened. And Peter decided to mix his upcoming record in Atmos. And so I had a week of trying stuff, which was amazing in itself. And then I got the gig. That's it. That's it in a nutshell.
You say you got the gig. Did you know there was a gig to get? Was there a talk of, this is going to be mixed in immersive?
Yes, it came up several times as a possibility. Lovely little, asides, Peter being impressed by what we were doing binaurally and thoughts and ideas, and me showing him stuff, how this could sound, stuff I'd done before. And then he booked me for a week, which was super special because, I didn't expect any particular approach and stuff. And I didn't know what I was going to listen to, so I asked. He wasn't around for a couple of days, and so I asked his assistant Faye if I should listen to some of the stuff. And she came around and she said, "I'll just ask him when he takes a break wherever he is." And then 20 minutes later, she came back with a hard drive with everything on it that they were working on, and they said, "You can do whatever you want."
Talk about not being precious.
Yes, it was wonderful. And then I took 2 of the songs I like best and started working on them. And so he liked that. He seemed to like it. And then I came back a couple of months later, worked on the first song that was to be released, Panopticon. And afterwards, I got the nod that I was going to do the whole thing. So that's how I got the gig.
You mixed in the Red Room over there.
Yeah.
So this is where you mixed I.O.
This is where I mixed I.O., yes. Spent a long time in here.
How long did it take to mix the record?
A bit less than 3 months.
But is it a case of like you're mixing a track, you're waiting for notes? I mean, what's the process like?
No, the total days added up. I would go for. The notes weren't that intense. I mean, he was, that's one of the wonderful things working with Peter. So, as you know, most Atmos mixes are like a companion piece to a stereo mix.
Mm-hmm.
And as the Atmos mix, you're kind of supposed to adhere to the sound of the stereo mix.
Yeah.
And once again, I think you have to make music for Immersive in order for it to be, relevant for a long time.
Agreed.
And Peter agreed as well and said, I don't really care if it sounds anything like stereo as long as it's great. It took quite a while to hook this up, and he didn't micromanage me. He always kind of went for the emotional thread. He wouldn't say, or he said it like once for all these songs, like, I'd like to have more high end on the snare or something like that. Mm-hmm. But everything else was like, well, the story's kind of getting lost because that is so loud. And that would be perfect instruction, because I'd know, okay, so this is what I'm building around. That is just whipped cream. It's not part of the fabric. So that was fabulous. But, the way I mixed that stuff, even the most simple song would take about 4 days. And some of the not so simple ones took up to 10. So it really added up over time.
There's a lot of tracks you can hear, but at the same time, it's not like a lot of tracks all playing simultaneously. It's like a lot of instrumental ideas coming and going. At least that's how it doesn't feel like I'm hearing 55 guitars playing at the same time and an orchestra going on.
No, but there's lots of hidden small sounds that do this and that here and there. Yeah. And then, I had the liberty, it kind of grew out of the process to add, if I felt like I needed it, to translate the creative intent that I felt was in the tracks, to translate it from a stereo greatness into an everywhere greatness.
Yep.
So I did overdubs and such. So, and did all kinds of treatments. Or, for example, if there was an orchestra, which is a ton of tracks in itself, and I want the orchestra to go da 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 dee da da or whatever, I'd have to double it a couple of times. So there's one song called Road to Joy, which when I got it was around 400 tracks, and when I was done with it, it was over 700.
Wow.
And that's when my laptop went. But that took a long time to get that song really as great as it is now.
Tony Levin and everybody I've spoken to, Hugh, has pointed out about working with Peter. It's like he might try 55 ideas to end up at the perfect idea. So the intention is there,
the interesting thing is that's really what's different about working with him and Prince. Prince would go like, okay, this works for me, and that's the end of that. Mm-hmm. Whereas Peter very consciously says it's about the process. Meaning, if your absolute deadline to deliver so you can have the vinyl out by Christmas is on Tuesday, he will work up until Tuesday morning, not because he's not happy, but because he can. There was this one instance at the end of my process where, by all means, as far as I could tell, we were done with it. And I told him, look, if you need some updates, I have like 2 more weeks then before the deadline. And I got a call from Mike, his main man, going, do you want to come in and work on it some more? And I'm like, what's wrong with it? And they went, nothing. It's just we figured you can. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So in a lot of things, where you went to a certain point that seemed finished, he would totally go back and change things. And lots of things were kicked out. There were a couple arrangement moments. There's a song called This Is Home, where I had this fairly elaborate setup for one of the transitions based on what he gave me, and then he came in and was like, nah, it's all too much, and you throw out like 2/3 of it. So that whole kill your children attitude of not getting too attached to what you've done, he's got that down pretty well. Yeah.
Reminds me of the Eno story, and these guys are obviously of the same ilk and have worked together.
Yeah, and he's was part of this. I didn't work with Brian Eno, but towards, I would say, in the last quarter of it all, Brian Eno added stuff here and there and really asked good questions and added up a couple of sounds here and there. Very simple things, but really, really well chosen road signs to a final emotional point. I thought that was really cool what he did. Very impressed. But that's great. That's sometimes I feel, you know how it is. You kind of get attached to worlds you create. And you go like, why wouldn't I do it? And I was a bit worried about it personally. Having been socialized by the Prince approach, which is like, just, make 10 songs and then keep 2 and stick the rest in the basement because they just don't work with what you're trying to say right now, but they're still good. 2, this whole like create huge worlds that end up being one song. And I thought maybe I'd get impatient. Didn't happen. I think the one problem I had once, because I'm a fan, there was like one song where I was like, this is not touching me as it could. And then I muted some stuff. And that's like the one time where I went like, whoa, what just happened to my song? I can tell you what it is. It's a song called This Is Home Again. This Is Home Again, the song. There's a piece in the middle with like these very happy strings. And to me, that was, the whole song is kind of like a Cowboy Junkie, this really cool, reflective, guitar-based, subdued thing. And all of a sudden there's this Annie Lennox string quartet. And I was like, I'll just turn that off. Whatever bothers you in the day or night. And he went like, ah, you know. But that's the only time. That's really the only time. And that happened because I was getting...
You're falling in love with that.
Yes. And, you know, it's kind of... There's always that yin-yang between, like, how do I make better what's there? And I understand it and try to make it better. Or fully realize it, try to make better. It's the wrong thing. And, like, whoa, I could do something with that. You know, there's always... You know, as a mixing engineer specifically, you kind of sit on the fence between production and engineering.
Right.
And sometimes you fall to the wrong side. But... Once again, Peter, being the great guy that he is, he sent me like an email with fewer mix notes than I'd get for any regular stereo mix. And then it was half a page of apologizing that he had to do this to me because I put all this great work in and stuff. He's just a wonderful man. And I have to say, he's the first one I ever worked with who truly, fully wants your personality, your creative input on board. That's why he hires you.
I see it's an ATC setup. Did you have any choice in the speaker?
None at all.
Okay.
No. So I'm part of a studio in Germany called MSM in Berlin.
Yep.
And we have Amphions. And that's kind of what, that would be my go-to thing. Because most other speakers are too friendly. So, you know, when I'm at my own place, I hear what I don't hear in other places, if you know what I mean.
Right.
This room is great, though. I don't want to diss these speakers at all, but...
You just mixed one of the best sounding immersive records of all time.
Thank you.
In this room, on these speakers.
Yeah, I'm not dissing at all, but I just want to point out what is difficult. So what's fairly usual and what's the same in here is like you have like the full power in the front.
Yeah.
And then for the heights and the surrounds, you have something different. Good as well.
Right.
But you have to kind of create this elaborate system to kind of string them together to create a whole. Then if you go somewhere else, the weighing of the front versus rest may be different. And so you don't know really what's going on. In the studio that I have in Berlin, we use the same speakers all around. So that's a difference. And I'm not trying to plug my studio here, but I'm just saying that's what a difference is.
Isn't there a Dolby certification? So you set up some mics here and it gets all the speakers to have the same level and frequency response.
That's what happens. You see, you have to, you know, if you don't need bass management. So one of the problems is, you know, you clearly have a time delay between the front and the rear, and the bigger the room, the more delay. So you kind of have to go through that. Now, if you have different speakers and you do your bass management through a sub that's in the front, how do you hook that up to be precise? And then, if you're in a situation where you want to track on it, is there latency because you have all these delays in there?
Yeah.
So there are still a lot of questions that haven't been answered just because so far Atmos has been such a, you know, pure mixing for one format, usually, you know, originally for movie stuff idea, that how to like fuck it up creatively has not entered the thought stream yet. Right. Now, what we did in the other studio is we didn't use the Dolby guys to set up. We just used the man that built the studio and then whom we trust in our ears. In the beginning, at least, Dolby tried to push this weird curve on you, which I would certainly ignore by all means if you do your own music stuff. Which, you know, it makes sense once again if you do movies. If you go, you know, that you have the same sound in every place you go to, yes. But if you're making music that is then shared on a variety of formats, why would you do that? You know? In rooms you can't control, like your living room, headphones, whatever it is.
So were you continually checking in a binaural mix?
No. I really, my workflow is more or less, I listen to what I have. I make like a lot of stream of consciousness notes. What I hear could be cool and immersive.
Yeah.
And then I worked down that road. A lot of it is really, is sous chef work where you edit stuff or you set stuff up and blah, blah, blah. And I can do that anywhere in headphones. I can do that in my house on a laptop. And then I come in here and start a basic sound. And then I feel like, okay, what's working, what isn't. Then I may add bits to reinforce what's there, or I do some reampings and stuff. And then I finish the sound so it sounds great in here. And at that point, I will put on headphones and see if there's anything substantially different in headphones.
Did you use this for automation, or are you working on a mouse?
No, a bit of both. The problem with this for automation is that there's always a bit of latency. So you will have to, when you react to it and you write your move, it'll always be a bit behind where you're at. So there's a lot of graphical post work.
Is this Huey? Is that still the Huey?
I think it's still the protocol, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's well, I love them. I mean, I have it, I have one of those old when it was still euphonics at my house. And I certainly use it to compare things. So I assign certain things to certain faders. For example, if it were a mix where I compare to stereo, I just go chop, 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 chop. I can go between the two. I match the loudness level. That's a good way to do it. And then I do, there aren't that many huge moves that I had to do. They're more general, like, okay, all right, the vocal is too whispery in the verse, and then I have to push it up. And a lot of times I would put that just on a different track. So like vocal sound 1 on track 1, vocal sound 2 on track 2, and then going through a bus, and as you do.
It seems to me, as a fan of Peter's all his work, is that the dynamics are built into the production.
They're built into the production, and sometimes actually that's the pure mixing part of it. That's quite a challenge because one part of the vocal may have been recorded the first time he had the idea with a live mic, and then there may have been a session where he used a different mic or it didn't have the headphones on, or the other way around, or whatever. So you have these bits, and there's a bit of forensic work involved, especially when it's a really quiet song. But the dynamics are totally built in, and that's the beauty of it. That's why in Atmos it's such wonderful material to work with, because I can really, I'm not trying to go, okay, how do I make the arrangement better? But like, how do I take that ebb and flow of the arrangement and make it work in a bigger space? I'll give you an example. The example I always give is the first song on the album is called Panopticon. And so I got
Which was the first single, I believe.
First single as well. So I pretty much mixed them actually in order because they came out. So I didn't mix it in one go. I mixed it in like chunks of 3 or 4 songs. As he was deciding which one he was going to release next. So sometimes I had to kind of go, Panopticon song, I got the files, and it's this murky soup of electronic sounds. And then the sun rises with 2 acoustic guitars, which works fine in stereo. But in everywhere, there was no sun rising because it was just here. So that's the first time I asked, could I maybe record a bunch more guitars? And he said, okay. And I went and recorded a bunch more guitars. Katie, who played the original ones, and another friend, Stuart McCullum, in the wood room, and recorded them 6 more times with a little immersive.
So Katie was engineering the original album and playing on it.
He's super open, like I said. He's super open to contribution. So all the engineers, at least the recording engineers that now got their Grammy, also played on the record, yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Added a little loop here and there, did this in here, and blah. Some of it went away again, but those guitars she did. So I recorded 6 more guitars, and all of a sudden the sun was rising all over the place.
Beautiful.
So that type of dynamic, that's what I'm trying to enhance in a cool Atmos.
What makes this album so unique, and hopefully is opening the doors to more people to do this, is that everything was envisioned at one time. That there's going to be, first of all, the 2 different mixes, the dark and the bright, the Chad and the Spike mixes, but then also this immersive mix simultaneously being done. And you were given a lot of freedom by Peter to be creative and explore the studio space, as it were.
Well, I didn't get any directives, I mean, so my thing is I haven't started with this whole like, okay, we need an Atmos version of something, but I haven't started with creating in immersive. It's like, what's the point of a new form of creative conversation if all you do is repeat what's already been said in another way of presentation. So I think you have to create in immersive for it to be relevant, at least over a long period of time. Otherwise, it's just another way to blow up something. I mean, it can be well done, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a flawed concept. And Peter really bought into that. So he said, I asked specifically at the beginning of Panopticon, so do I have to listen to a specific one of these mixes? And he goes, I don't care at all if it sounds like any of them, as long as it's great. And that's probably the best, seal of freedom that I've ever gotten.
Which I imagine is how he approaches everything.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's always involved, it's like when all the arrangement bits. And then it got really cool because after that, first of all, I could create whatever I wanted to, and I could add what I had to translate what I thought would be the creative intention. And also he took me along, there were still some recordings afterwards where I could just put up a bunch of immersive arrays to make it, more doable for me. So for all the string stuff, I was there. It's 2 days at British Grove. Then we recorded some great piano at his house. He has this huge room at his house, which is bigger than this, actually. And it has a Bosendorfer in it. So we recorded in there and it just decked out the place in mics. And that's why songs like Playing for Time and stuff can be so enormous.
So one of the things I've absolutely loved about your work with Peter is that whenever I go to an immersive room, and you and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, if they haven't already, I'm always like, you need to check out this album. And I always go to the court because the movement on that makes perfect sense. Often I hear things that sound a little kind of hokey for the sake of it. Beep, boop, 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 beep, beep, like firing things around. And I get it. You want to explore the studio space, as it were. But the basic rhythm on that right from the get-go just feels so natural. I suppose dumb questions would be, did you try many different things? Was it instinctive that you would go with that movement?
That was instinctive. So like I told you before, I usually start listening to what's there and put down ideas where I feel like, okay, this could work. And a lot of times, I try them and then I revert to wow, this is if it's something more dancey, for example, and you take the you could go left, right. And sometimes it works, but most of the times it doesn't. But with the chord, I had that down right away and I reamped that percussion thing through a small custom amp that Bob Ledbeater, the amazing tech here, built. And actually that was a bit of discussion with Peter too, because he wasn't sure if that wasn't distracting too much from the lead vocal. And I made it a bit closer. It was further spread out before. But anyway, the basic thing was there and it was very, very dear to me. I thought that's really important to have that there. And that song, the chord just works so well because you have this call and response thing as well. So the song presents itself. While the pillars all fall. The hardest songs on the album to mix for Atmos were actually the ones that are probably the most pop, bread and butter arrangements like I.O. and stuff, which are great songs, but, that are just, bass, guitar, paddy type stuff, and, a vocal. How do I make that big without being weird? So there's a lot of sound design in there and stuff like that, but songs like The Chord really offered themselves for creating mysterious little caverns. So yeah, that was there from the beginning.
It is an incredibly impressive album, and that's an incredibly impressive song to work in an Atmos. I think if you go into a room, put it on, get used to it, use it as your reference mix. It is one of the finest mixes that I know in Immersive.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I'm really proud of this, I should say that. It's not just...
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that guy, and I pinch myself, haven't been able to do this all the time. And I knew when we did it that it was really, really special. And I'm glad it's being recognized. So thank you, beautiful people. It's great.
Not to be contradictory here, because what is the beautiful thing about I.O. and about what you all collectively did is you took music and at all times thought about how can it be in all environments. Mm-hmm. I've got to ask the dumb obvious question. Is there any plans to go back to stuff?
To catalog stuff?
Past catalog stuff, yeah.
I wish there was, and if there is, I'm totally open for it. But to be fair, there hasn't been a conversation. He would be the perfect candidate to do a residency of some sort in a place that gives itself to, let's say, a stage that is centered in a room. I felt like, and I've done this before, to have the music coming out of the middle and the people surrounding it is an unbelievably unique experience. So to answer your question, I would love for him to rethink his live stuff that way and to be able to help prepare that stuff. And I think that would be a great first step to approaching the catalog. I always feel like, not every song lends itself to Atmos. And I would say most of the albums that I make that are companion pieces for stereo things, 2/3 are better, hopefully, in Atmos or a huger experience, but a third isn't worse, meaning it's an even keel. So it'd be great to do like an Atmos greatest hits album of Peter Gabriel songs that aren't necessarily chosen because they're greatest hits in terms of popularity, but because they're just best for creating these immersive worlds. Whatever it is, I'll drink what he's drinking any day.
No Self-Control is one of my favorite songs of his, definitely one of my favorite pieces of production because it has the intruder drum sound, it's got, dynamics up the yin-yang when those fill, everything about it is absolutely phenomenal. I wonder, would that be a great song to do in Immersive or?
I'd have to listen to it more closely. I think, Biko would be a great one for sure that, because you mentioned it. I'm pretty positive most of the songs of Us, out of, the album Us, Digging in the Dirt, stuff like that, that would be great. I'd be a bit more selective.
I'm hearing Games Without Frontiers.
Yeah, certainly. There's tons of things. But, once again, if you can augment it like we did for I.O., most things will work.
Yeah.
I wonder how, Peter Gabriel fans are pretty forgiving when it comes to.
Of course, because they expect innovation.
You couldn't do it with a Beatles song, but, so that would probably be it. I thought about, like the second album he did, there's a song on there called Indigo, which I always thought would be a great one for a remake because it's so open and it's so spacious and you could really do something with it. But, as it is now, I'm not sure it would be a great Atmos mix. Anything off that album, I'm not sure. But the first one has a couple of gems as well. I'd be busy. I'd have no problem making that album.
He is an innovator, and all innovators like to constantly move forward. So this might all happen. Maybe it's something that happens in a few years.
I just saw this clip of his from a couple of years back where he was asked, if he had a guru, and he said his guru was a dog in the park that was running after all the things that smelled good. Aww. And that
what a great quote.
Yeah, I can say that's kind of how this works around here. So if he runs in my direction, I'll gladly help him.
I have my trifecta of artists, and Eno and Fripp definitely are part of this trifecta. But the actual, when it comes to lead singers, and it is Peter Gabriel, David Bowie, and Kate Bush, and they all always push the boundaries, and I think they all share that exact thing you're talking about.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm a big Bowie fan. I wasn't that huge a Bowie fan in my formative years. I appreciated it, and then it really grew into this. I love experimentation that leads to something that I can understand emotionally and something I can sing along to. And all the three you mentioned know how to do that. There's a lot of experimenters, like, most of the krautrock stuff.
Of course. Phenomenal.
Phenomenal, yes, but you won't whistle it in the kitchen, which I feel still is something that, and it, for me, subjectively, won't help me if my girlfriend leaves me at age 18 or whatever. But his stuff will, and so will Bowie's stuff, and so will Kate Bush's stuff. It really touches me, so.
Beautiful. Well, what are you working on at the moment?
I work on a variety of things. We're doing an immersive album here with an artist called Adrian Utley of Portishead. There are various things I've done, kind of some of my own stuff and with friends.
Which I have heard, and it is phenomenal.
Well, thank you.
He played it to us without telling me what it was. First of all, you sound like you're singing with an English accent. So I felt like, this is some cool English band that you're developing. And then I was like, who is it? And you're like, me. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I'll put it out to the world. I'm a bit timid, but what do you do?
Then, you've got quite a high bar.
Yeah, yes. And then there's a band called The Breath that I've done a concert with in a room in Manchester. It's a duo. They're signed to Real World Records, and a variety of other things I'm working on.
The Adrian Utley stuff, that's recorded and deliberately mixed for Immersive?
Correct. Yeah. So far, not a single thought about stereo. Actually, all the things I just mentioned, not a single thought about stereo. It'll probably be really hard trying to make a stereo mix if people want to hear it. But at this point, I just don't care.
Would that be one of those things where you're hired to be the guy that takes the stereo often and make it into immersive? Do you think that's one of those things you might say, I'm the immersive guy, I want to hand it off to a Chad Blake to mix in stereo?
Totally. Yeah. Go like take off whatever you can't use. And yeah, that's exactly it. You know, it's a different thing. I feel like this whole idea, which, you know, it's a great idea, that whole Atmos and all the other codecs where you make one mix and then it works in every environment. Mm-hmm. That's not really happening, is it? So if you need to hear it how it was intended. And if you want to intend a stereo reaction, you need to make a stereo mix. And it's, by the way, the same with binaural, I feel like. One of the problems is that, you know, I make the mix in here, and then Apple or Dolby put their sauce on it, and so you can hear it in headphones. And I don't really have a way to influence that. There would be a way to easily do that, but I personally would hope that one day I can make a dedicated binaural mix and stick it in the package with the Dolby Atmos mix, and then, you know, when my phone realizes, okay, headphones are on, then it just switches to that mix, because that would make a huge difference.
Buff, thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and checking out this wonderful world we live in.
Thanks, everyone. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, ciao, goodbye, tschüss.